Lyman Bostock, star outfielder for the California Angels, one of the highest-paid players in baseball, shot to death.
His career ended without warning and almost without consequence. 4 seasons, 526 games, a .311 average. He was only 27. This isn't a murder story, but the tale of a superstar who earned $2.3 million, tried to give it back, and died in the wrong seat of the wrong car. His killer walked free in 7 months. But Bostock's death changed something. Lyman Bostock Jr. was born on November 22, 1950, in Birmingham, Alabama. His father, Lyman Bostock Sr., was a legendary first baseman who played for several Negro League teams starting in 1938, including the Brooklyn Royal Giants, the Birmingham Black Barons, and the Chicago American Giants. He was an absolute star, even winning the Negro American League batting championship in 1941 with a mind-boggling .466 batting average and playing in the prestigious East-West All-Star game. But despite his brilliant talent, he was blocked by baseball's cruel color line. He served his country in World War II, putting his career on hold, yet he never received a single call-up to the major leagues. The system completely ignored him. Lyman Sr. played until 1954, but his career ended without the major league recognition he earned. That same year, the emotional strain took its toll, and Lyman's parents split up. His mother, Annie Pearl, decided to take her young son and move away. First, they went to Gary, Indiana in 1954, and later, in 1958, they made a massive cross-country trek to Los Angeles, California. They arrived in Los Angeles with just $7 in her pocket. Annie eventually found a stable job as a hospital technician, which kept them afloat. But through all of this, Lyman Jr. remained deeply estranged from his father. He felt abandoned. He once famously told a New York Times reporter that his father might have taught Willie Mays how to play the game, but he didn't do the same for his own son. Lyman Jr. went to Manual Arts High School in Los Angeles, where he played first base, the exact same position his father had played decades earlier. He became an absolute star, earning all Southern League honors as a senior. This caught the attention of college coach Bob Heigert, who recruited him to play at Valley State College, which we now know as Cal State Northridge. But instead of diving straight into baseball, Lyman Jr. made a choice that surprised everyone. He chose student activism over sports during his first 2 years. It was the height of the civil rights movement, and he wanted to make a real difference. The St. Louis Cardinals actually drafted him in 1970, but he declined the offer because he was dedicated to his studies and his community. When he finally decided to play college baseball, he dominated. He used his smooth left-handed swing to bat .344 and earned selection as a conference all-star as a junior in 1971, and played even better in 1972, winning a place on the conference's first team while leading his school to a second-place finish in the Division II College World Series. But despite his college success, the professional scouts were skeptical. Perhaps because he had taken that 2-year break for activism. The Minnesota Twins finally took a chance on him, but only in the 26th round of the 1972 draft, selecting him 596th overall. It was a long, exhausting road to the majors. He spent 3 full seasons grinding in the minor leagues, starting with Charlotte, where the Twins switched him from first base to the outfield. He showed absolutely no home run power, hitting 0 home runs in 57 games, but his overall game was outstanding. By the spring of 1975, he was virtually unstoppable, hitting a staggering .391 for Tacoma. The Twins could no longer ignore him. He earned his call-up to the big leagues and made his major league debut on April 8, 1975. In that game, he went 1 for 4 with 2 walks and 3 runs scored in an 11-4 victory over the Texas Rangers. His father never made the majors. His son got there and was on his way to winning the batting titles Lyman Sr. never chased. What happened when he finally arrived? When Lyman Jr. finally stepped onto a major league field, he carried a batting style that was pure poetry in motion. He was quickly compared to his legendary teammate Rod Carew. Both batted left-handed, utilized the entire field, and focused on sharp contact rather than home run power. During his first full season in 1976, despite dealing with nagging injuries, he finished 4th in the American League batting race with a stellar .323 average. He was only behind George Brett, Hal McRae, and Rod Carew. On July 24, 1976, he hit for the cycle against the White Sox and finished the year leading the American League with 45 doubles. Rod Carew famously said everything about Lyman's skill made it clear he would win batting titles one day. By 1977, Lyman was lifting his game to superstar heights. He became the primary leadoff hitter for the Twins, setting the table for Carew. He batted .336, second only to Carew's legendary .388. Defensively, he played an incredibly shallow center field, making impossible catches. On May 25, 1977, he set an American League record with 17 putouts in a doubleheader, and tied the Major League record with 12 putouts in a single game. He was quickly becoming one of the most respected players in the entire sport. But despite his success, he made only $20,000 that year. The Twins owner, Calvin Griffin, was notoriously cheap, making negotiations incredibly frustrating. When the Twins finally offered a 6-year, $2 million extension, it was too late. Bostock felt the offer was inadequate and chose to file for free agency. He did not want to stay under Griffith's cheap reign, believing staying would defeat the purpose of what Curt Flood fought to achieve for players' freedom. He had to choose between staying in a comfortable but disrespectful situation or risking everything to stand up for his principles. Lyman chose to stand up. He entered the newly created free agent market, and he was the most sought-after player in baseball. 13 different clubs selected him in the free agent draft, and 8 teams picked him in the very first round. The New York Yankees and George Steinbrenner offered him a massive contract that was $250,000 more than anyone else. And Ray Kroc of the San Diego Padres offered him ownership of multiple McDonald's franchises. But Lyman turned them all down. On November 21st, 1977, he signed a 5-year, $2.3 million contract with the California Angels. He chose the Angels because he wanted to return home to his mother and his wife Yvonne in Los Angeles. And what did he do with his very first paycheck? Within days of signing, he donated $10,000 to his mother's church in Birmingham to rebuild its Sunday school. His very first act with generational wealth was to give it away. But the massive contract brought intense pressure. When the 1978 season started, Lyman fell into a horrific batting slump, hitting a dismal .150 in April. At one point, he was 2 for 39. He was so consumed by guilt that he felt he was stealing money. He walked into general manager Buzzy Bavasi's office and demanded to return his April salary of approximately $36,000. Bavasi and owner Gene Autry flatly refused, saying it was legally impossible. But Lyman couldn't live with himself taking the man's money without delivering. So, he announced he would donate his entire April pay to charity. Thousands of requests flooded in from all over the country. And Lyman didn't just hand the money to an organization. Instead, he spent hours of his free time personally reviewing every single letter that arrived, determined to find the individuals who were hurting the most and needing immediate support. Once his mind was clear and his conscience was clean, his bat came alive. By June, he was hitting a blazing .404. He had climbed back to his rightful place among the elites. But as the season entered its final week, fate was waiting in the shadows. It was Saturday, September 23rd, 1978. The Major League season was winding down to its final week, and the California Angels were in Chicago to play the White Sox at Comiskey Park. Lyman was leading the Angels in batting with a .296 average. During the game, he went 2 for 4, once again raising his season average and proving his elite consistency. But the Angels lost that game 5-4. A heartbreaking defeat that effectively eliminated them from postseason contention. After the game, Lyman did what he always did whenever he played in Chicago. He traveled to nearby Gary, Indiana, to visit his uncle, Thomas Turner. Gary was a city Lyman knew well, having spent the first 7 years of his life there. His uncle Turner hosted a warm family dinner. After eating, Lyman and his uncle decided to go visit Joan Hawkins, a childhood friend of Lyman's whom he had tutored when they were teenagers, but hadn't seen in years. When they arrived at Hawkins's home, they met Joan's sister, Barbara Smith, who was currently living there. Barbara was separated and deeply estranged from her husband, Leonard Smith. Lyman had known Barbara for exactly 20 minutes. In that brief time, he listened to her struggles and, in another typical act of kindness, he handed her a $10 bill to buy clothing for herself. That was the entirety of their interaction. It was just a small, charitable gesture from a man who loved to help people. Later that evening, Turner agreed to drive Joan and Barbara to their cousin's home. Turner sat in the driver's seat. Joan Hawkins sat in the front passenger seat. Lyman and Barbara climbed into the back seat together. But unbeknownst to any of them, Leonard Smith, a 31-year-old unemployed man with a history of at least 7 prior arrests, was waiting in the shadows outside. He had been stalking his estranged wife, and when he saw Lyman get into the backseat of the car with her, his mind snapped. He immediately concluded, without any evidence, that the two were having an affair. He was armed with a highly lethal .410-bore shotgun. Turner started the car and pulled away. Leonard Smith quickly hopped into his own car and chased them through the streets of Gary. At approximately 10:40 p.m., Turner stopped his vehicle at a red traffic light at the intersection of 5th and Jackson Streets. Suddenly, Leonard Smith's car pulled up right alongside them. Smith leaned out of his window, aimed the .410 shotgun at the rear window of Turner's car, and pulled the trigger. He fired a single blast. Smith later insisted that his estranged wife was his only intended target, but he was a terrible shot, and Lyman was sitting in the wrong seat. Lyman was positioned directly between Barbara Smith and the shotgun blast. Barbara was struck by a single pellet in her neck, but Lyman took the full force of the shotgun blast directly in his right temple. The intersection erupted into chaos. Turner frantically drove to St. Mary's Medical Center. Doctors rushed Lyman into emergency surgery, but the damage was far too severe. At 1:30 a.m. on September 24, 1978, the superstar outfielder took his final breath. He was only 27 years old. His life and career cut short in a single senseless second. The shock of Lyman's death reverberated throughout the entire sporting world, but the nightmare was far from over. The real outrage was about to begin in an Indiana courtroom. In 1979, Leonard Smith stood trial for murder. His defense attorneys didn't deny that he fired the weapon. Instead, they had argued that his estranged wife's alleged infidelities had driven him into a state of temporary insanity. The prosecution fought back, presenting clear evidence of premeditation. Smith had actively borrowed the shotgun, waited outside the house, tracked the car, and pulled the trigger. It was a calculated, deliberate act of violence. Yet, under Indiana law at the time, once the defense raised the insanity plea, the prosecution had to prove Smith's sanity beyond a reasonable doubt. The first trial ended in a hung jury. During the second trial, the jury accepted his insanity plea and found him not guilty by reason of insanity. He was committed to the Logansport State Hospital for treatment. But what happened next absolutely devastated the Bostock family and the public. After approximately 7 months, psychiatrists at the hospital declared that Leonard Smith was no longer mentally ill. Since he was clinically sane, the state had no legal authority to keep him locked up. He was released. The total time from the night of the murder to his complete freedom was roughly 21 months. Lyman's father called the verdict sick justice, while Gary prosecutor Marvin Keefe publicly condemned the decision as a loophole, not a judgment. This brings us back to our first question. How could a man commit murder in broad daylight and walk away in less than 2 years? The public outcry over Smith's rapid release became a historical turning point, exposing a massive systemic failure. The public rage became the direct catalyst for a revolutionary legal reform. Indiana became one of the very first states to close this dangerous loophole by introducing a brand new legal standard: the guilty but mentally ill verdict. Mechanically, this changed everything. Previously, an insanity acquittal meant confinement in a hospital only until sanity was restored, leading to immediate release. Under the new guilty but mentally ill verdict, defendants are still held legally responsible for their crimes. They're committed to a psychiatric hospital for treatment, but once they're declared sane, they are not set free. Instead, they're immediately transferred to a state prison to serve the remainder of their full criminal sentence. This legal change completely reshaped Lyman Bostock's institutional legacy, serving as a nationwide blueprint that modernized criminal justice across America and protected countless lives. While his legal legacy grew, his achievements were recognized. In 1981, Cal State Northridge honored his memory by inducting him as the inaugural member of their Athletic Hall of Fame. Lyman Bostock's lifetime batting average of .311 matches Jackie Robinson's career mark, the very number that broke the color barrier and made his own career possible. While his father was blocked from the big leagues, the son made it, only to be taken before his journey was finished. Baseball didn't kill Lyman Bostock, but a failing legal system that let his killer walk free in 7 months completely abandoned him. While Indiana acted to fix its laws, Major League Baseball never made a single move to honor his legislative legacy. If you want to support more deep dives into forgotten history, please hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for our next videos.